Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Thanks for tuning in again. So today I wanted to talk to you about drawing dog fur with colored pencil. So I did this commission, I just finished it and I filmed some parts of it. You can also find an extended tutorial in real time on Patreon, so if you want a longer and more in-depth tutorial you can check it out there. For $4 you can get access to all the tutorials I uploaded. But in this video I'll give you a more compact and quick tutorial about drawing dog fur. So when it comes to materials, I'm using Faber-Castell Polychromos on Canson 1557 paper, and I also use one white Caran d'Ache luminance pencil. So let's get started. What I do first is put in base layers. So when you're working in colored pencil, it's super important to work in light layers, to use very soft pressure and build up your colors that way. You don't want to saturate the paper too often, you don't want to get rid of the paper texture too often, because you'll never get the colors right away. So you kind of have to mix and blend colors together to get the right shades. And that is achieved by using lots of layers. So you can see me here working on a part of the muzzle. So I put in some base layers first. For this part of the nose I mostly use walnut brown, burnt sienna and terracotta, and also Caput Mortem violet, that's a very dark purple. And with that I put down some base layers with a very light hand, and I use very sharp pencils. And here you can see that I take the Caran d'Ache luminance, the white one, and with this I blend the colors into the paper. So I use this one for blending. When blending like this, the colors get a bit lighter and a bit smoother, so you get rid of the paper texture that way. And I don't use too much pressure for this either, so that I will be able to add some more colors on top later. So you can see me take the walnut brown now, and now I can add the fur texture on top. So for the base layers, I'm not drawing the hairs individually, but I put down an even layer, then I blend, and then I'm going to put in the individual hairs. So the fur in this area is super short, so I'm focusing on shades rather than drawing individual hairs. For the longer fur, which I will be showing you later on in the video, I'm focusing on drawing the clumps of fur and not on individual hairs either. So when you want to get a realistic effect with colored pencils, make sure to focus on the contrast and on the color shades and on the saturation, instead of focusing too much on drawing each individual hair. So you can still see that I'm using the walnut brown to draw in some individual hairs here and there. I do have a reference photo for this. I always use reference photos for pet portraits because most of the time I don't know these animals in person, so I have to use photos to get a realistic result. Now I want to show you a bit of the neck, and I'm showing you this part right from the start. So this is an area with longer fur. So what I do first is to map out the shadows in the fur. So I use a lighter gray for this, cold gray, and I'm just mapping out the direction of the fur growth and where the shadows are going to be. And I'm doing this with a very light hand, and I make sure to keep my pencil sharp at all time. So here I'm really dividing the fur into clumps of fur, and I'm not looking at individual hairs. So for this you have to take a very close look at your reference photo and really analyze the fur and figure out in which direction it is going. So that first layer was very light, and it's just for me. You won't be seeing that layer in the final product, but it's really good to work in very small steps. And by putting down that first layer of shadows, it's much easier for you after that to judge which step you have to take. So now I'm moving on to the coloring part. And this area of fur was a bit orangey, browny, reddish brown. So for this I'm using the walnut brown again, and I'm going to darken up those shadows that I just put in with the gray. So I'm basically going over those shadows again and darkening them up. So what I'm basically doing is I draw around the lighter hairs, and so I'm putting down the dark shadows first, and then later on I will be glazing the lighter colors on top. So you can't really go with light on dark with colored pencil, or at least not on this paper. But what I can do is a bit of glazing. So it's very important to have your shadows mapped out first, to have the right contrast in there. And when the contrast is right, I am going to put in the lighter colors. So you can really see me following the direction of the hairs. So now I have glazed some terracotta on top of the lighter clumps of fur, and then to get rid of the texture a bit, I use the Caran d'Ache Luminance again to blend. After blending, the colors always get a bit lighter, so then I use the walnut brown again to darken everything up a bit more. Finally, to put in the darkest shadows, I use black. So I try to save my black for the very last, because when you're using black too soon, or when you're using black right away, your drawing will or can look very flat, not always, but yeah, I try to always mix my black in with some other color, with blues, or in this drawing with browns, and when doing that your black will get a lot more depth, so it will look a lot nicer. So now I am moving on to the final part of this portrait, which is the chest area, and this was quite a challenge because this fur was very light, kind of gray white, but with very dark hairs in between. And this is a difficult type of fur to draw with colored pencils because you, like I just explained, you have to draw around the lighter hairs. So what I do here is I take multiple shades of gray and brown as well, and I'm basically just going to draw around the clumps of hair. And the fur was going in all kinds of directions as well, so yeah, for this I really had to look at my reference to find out where the hairs were going. So always keep in mind that white fur is never completely white. You can always find some tone of brown or blue, sometimes purple in there, or yellow even. All kinds of colors. It depends on where the animal is, what the colors of the surroundings are, because the white fur will reflect the colors of the surroundings. So for this part of the dog I use the same techniques as I just used on the part underneath the nose, which is drawing around the shadows. So I took my gray and mapped out the direction of the fur growth, and then I took my darker gray colors and I darkened up the shadows in between the clumps of hair, and then to cover up the white areas I used very light gray to make the fur not appear completely white, but with a light tone of gray. And I also used some Caput Mortem Violet on top. So I wanted to give the white fur a bit of a purple glow, because that gave it a lot more depth. In total, this drawing took me about 25 hours to complete, and it is only 8 by 12 inches, so it's not a very big drawing, but colored pencil usually takes a long time to complete, especially when you're working in lots of layers. So yeah, I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I hope you learned something, and I'll also show you a pic of the finished portrait, and I really hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them below, and I'd love to see you join me on Patreon if you're interested in more tutorials like this and in longer tutorials. And then I want to thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to share this video with your friends if you found it helpful, and yeah, then I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye!